Let's go. I write stuff, podcast, illustrate. We'll just say I dabble. I dabble in things, and my guest also dabbles in things. As it turns out, it's Brent Nichols, author extraordinaire. How you doing, man?
Hi, Mom. I'm on TV.
You are on TV. No, it's been.
I'm good, Josh. How are you doing?
I am, dude. I feel great. I feel great. This week when I started, I went to God and I said, hey, basically, you want me to stay here? You give me something worth my while to stay in Windsor. And lo and behold, today it happened. I'm gonna have to make some changes with everything I'm doing a little bit, but I got what I wanted, and now it's just a matter of moving forward and doing some really, really cool stuff. Beyond that, I've been running up a storm, man. This has been a year of discovery for me. It turns out it's been kind of a year of discovery for you based on what we were talking about a little bit off the air. So
it's well, actually the game I was showing you was from like over a year ago, so it's but yeah, it's been a year of discovery. It's been an interesting year. It's been a year of change for me, like it has for everyone. So
yeah. I'm not doing COVID therapy today. I just don't want to do that. But what I do want to talk about, like, was this the game, like, when I interviewed you way back, was this the same game we talked about then?
I guess it probably is. Yeah, it's so yeah. I made myself a tabletop game. In pre-COVID times, I was hanging out once a week with a gaming group, and we'd play tabletop games every week. And eventually, I got to thinking about game design. I do cover designs. I do graphic design work, and with my pursuit of cover design, I've accumulated a ludicrous amount of stock art, actually, that I haven't used. And every once in a while, I get to thinking that I really ought to do something with it, and got to thinking about the strengths and weaknesses of different tabletop games. And so I designed a game that I've played half a dozen times, maybe with different groups, a game that I really love. So I've got a prototype that's a mix of custom game pieces and printed board and box from the Game Crafter, and stuff cobbled together from other games, basically just to make the demo version. So I'm always happy to show it off, so I'll do that.
Yeah, I got a real big kick out of this when I saw it off there. So
this is the box top: Traders and Tyrants, Explore, Build, Conquer, Grow Rich. And
I love that title. I love that title.
Stuff around the edges. Really, I've discovered it's really for 3 to 5 players. I've played it with 2 players, and it's terrible with 2 players. So I'm going to say it's 3 to 6 players, 3 to 5.
Yeah. Well, like, one of my favorite games, like, is in a different tabletop game. It's Suro. It sucks when it's just 2 people, but the moment you introduce that third player just adds just enough variance to make it interesting. So it's kind of the same thing. They're just like, that extra person just makes the dynamics that much more engaging.
It's more that it's a really specific flaw when there's 2 people. One person very quickly ends up slightly ahead, and there's no catching up.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's just a really bad imbalance that ruins the game, I think, when it's 2 players. So here's the board with a design that I really liked, but nobody else does. It's kind of ugly, and I'm starting to come around to realizing that, yeah, that is pretty bleak. I was just so impressed that I found this piece of stock art that had all these gorgeous hexagons on it, and I tweaked it so that it had the right number to make the exact map size and shape that I wanted. I was just basically, I couldn't get past thinking, hey, wow, it's already got the hexes built in, and I just, yeah, it's an ugly map, and I'm gonna change it. But this is the original version. 3 different ways to win. So you got the 1 track on the side here for victory, to encourage people to start battles to keep the game exciting. Another way to win is with accumulating money. So we got a currency track, and then there is it's been ages actually since I've looked at this. The other way to win is to control more than 1/3 of the territories. And as you can see, things get added with tape and paper as the design of the game evolves.
which is always cool. Now I get why people don't like it. I do think it's cool, but for a very different. I like the idea of like a grid, because it's kind of like a battle in a way. It's a battle game, and essentially trying to accumulate wealth, and there's a bunch of different ways. And I love the grid. The grid is a beautiful way of doing it. But yeah, with the way you're tied up, like especially with the art on the outside, when you look at the inside, it just doesn't quite fit the expectations that you
the new version will look more like you're looking down on land, and there'll be hexagons lines drawn on top of it. I'll just do it that way.
Cool. No, that's like honestly, man, it beats mine. Like my hodgepodge game was Bristol board, like chess pieces, dice, and like homemade cards. And it was just, but I mean, when you're building a game, like I interviewed Vox Media, not Vox, they're an indie game company, and they taught me that, like, honestly, from a storytelling standpoint, games are all about interaction, right? The best games usually have like this good back and forth between the players and the limitations the game sets on you. It's actually, that's where the true creativity and the storytelling in a good game really, really works.
It's remarkable how complex and seemingly straightforward, but not straightforward at all, game design is.
Yeah.
I'm pleased that my game is pretty playable. It's fun when I've played it. It's been a lot of fun to play. It's not going to win any awards, but it is extremely. You can get the basics of it, and it's very fast paced. I'd been playing too much. I'm going to go blank again. What's that? A big space game that takes like three days to play with the.
Oh, good lord! There's two of them.
With it's like the dystopia lost space empire thing and everything. Anyways, so we were playing that and it was taking just ages. You spend the vast majority of your time sitting there watching somebody else go through their move, and that was if you, in a 4-hour evening, that was 3 and 3/4 hours was watching somebody else take their turn. So I decided I'd go for a fast-paced game. So some of the cards. So I look on the back, and I got some various card designs for different actions and resources.
I dig it. Like I really did. Like you put a lot of work into this. Like as this is a how do I put this? A prototype.
Mm-hmm.
It's really impressive. I really like what you've done. It really made it pop and sing in a really, really cool way. So
it's a weird mix of good prototype and lame prototype. It's really both blended together.
Well, but I mean that you're still in that discovery part of the game.
Yeah.
Too. You're when I play test my game, I know this too. Like I discover new things about the game each and every time I play it, right? Mm-hmm. And I think what I mean, you're probably farther along than I am, because I'm still not sure what my average game looks like yet, because I haven't played enough of those games. Mm-hmm. And obviously with the pandemic and me being now somewhere far, far away, it's a lot more difficult to do than it was before. But I imagine in your case, it sounds like you've at least gotten to the point where you almost know what that standard game looks like. And now, and now it's like, okay, where are the cool extras so you can enhance the part of the games that don't always come up? But when they do, they're cool. Right? Am I about right on that?
That's part of it. Part of it is that I'm designing, I'm still tinkering slightly with how the game plays. Part of it is things like, the map being ugly. Part of it is figuring out exactly how to do the pieces, because I didn't get custom pieces made for this first prototype. I think a good general rule of thumb, if you're going to design a game, one thing that people have told me is probably good general advice is leave the graphic design till the very last. But because I'm a graphic designer, that was actually the easiest part for me. So I dove right in and made, really beautiful cards, because that was really straightforward and didn't cost me anything to design them. So I definitely did things backwards. Don't, if you want to try game design, don't do it the way I do. Don't start with graphic design unless you've got folders crammed full of stock art like I do. Sorry?
Do it like I do. Bristol board, this is like hodgepodge. Tone is one of usually it's one of the last things you work on. That all
Yeah.
said, it sounds to me like, is there a story to the game? Like, I'm just gonna ask that. It's like, did no?
At this point, no. I should probably, like, at some point try to write up some nice evocative stuff in the rules to give it a story. But really, it's just here's the territory, here's the pieces you get, here's your goals, move your pieces around the board. It has no more story than chess does, really, or checkers.
Okay, no, yeah, because that's the only. If I were to make the only other criticism I can make from just a distance, it's this. It feels like there should be a story there somewhere.
Yeah, I didn't even try, but
Yeah,
you're right.
yeah. It just feels like it, and because, but I also do think this too. Like, I agree with you that, like, the one thing one of my favorite games is Arkham Horror. I like Arkham Horror. It's a fun
now
game.
that is at the extreme other end where
Yeah.
I can't be bothered to play the game, but I would just sit there and read the materials because it's just
Yeah, I
jammed
know.
full
I
of.
love, like, the meta is so cool in that game. The only problem with it is much like your space game, it takes forever to play. I'd rather have a game where it's kind of like, I like elegant games. Like I mentioned Suro earlier, but I like games that have a very, very simple, and these are some of the hardest games to make, by the way. I know this too. The simplest setups, but that create the most interesting dynamics and scenarios in a short burst. I like interaction. Like I said, I realize, like, that's the true language of games. And what you really, really want to do with that is you want to make it so that I'm a collectible card game guy too. And the cool thing about a card game is it's a back and forth. I make an action, there's a reaction. There's there and it's quick. You see it, you note it, it doesn't take long, but you can create these really interesting board states really, 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 really fast. One of my favorite games that's kind of like that max mixture of both. Did you ever play the Game of Thrones board game?
Yes, I love that game.
No, that game is so good. Turns 6 through 9 are insanely complex, even though there's not much movement. Right, you're right, but those are my favorites. Your first 3-4 turns, everybody's kind of setting up their board set, kind of like whatever their strategies are going to be. And then 5, it gets dicey, but you're still kind of in that mix between setup and execution. And then 6 through 9, it's action reaction. Everybody's involved, and you're like, and because that whole board just goes up and down for those 4 turns. And then turn 10, usually depending on how many players are involved, there's usually 1 or 2 that can win the game, and 1 or 2 if it's 4 people, which is I think the right mix for that game. Right? There's 2 people that can spoil it, and there's 2 people that can win it. So, and it gets really, it's a brilliant game. It is one of the best board games I've ever played, and it's like, it's just 10 turns, but man, those last 4 just get you every single time. I love that about that game.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my all-time favorites.
So, I just for fun, like, what are your, like when you did this game, like, what were the games like you referenced, like, for your, like, you mentioned, like, your because of your fascination with board games, which ones like are the ones you like? I tell you, I prefer the elegant ones, like the elegant but simple, but like real diverse choices. Like, what's yours? Like, what's your favorites?
It's kind of all over the place. I find it really difficult to make a generalization. So, I really enjoy quite a wide variety of games, and there'll be games but there isn't really a genre or type of game that I particularly like. It's the individual game will grab me. I really liked Battlestar Galactica for a while, and then I kind of got frustrated with it and stopped enjoying it. But I enjoyed that one thoroughly for a long time. I can remember back in the day enjoying Risk, but there's some built-in inherent problems with Risk that I haven't played regular Risk in ages. I tend to like the global conquest games. I tend to like spending the evening sitting around the table with a bunch of really competitive people and all of us viciously cutting each other's throats and stabbing each other in the back. If you could get through it faster, Diplomacy would be one of my all-time favorite games. But it just
that's fair. That's fair.
Haven't got the stamina to play Diplomacy.
So one of my favorite, like, games, it's kind of cutthroat, but it's kind of fun too. It's kind of random. Is Dice Throne. It's made from a local gamer in Calgary, my buddy Corey, who's a big gamer. I'm saying quick shout out to Corey. Been a while, bud. Love you, miss you. But yeah, no, we like we had like a really big competitive rivalry in Magic. I have to admit this. Corey legit was one of the best Magic players I ever played against, bar none. Period. But when we got to our less competitive edges, we always found games that we just would have fun with all the time. And Dice Throne was the game we just settled on. It's just a neat. You pick a hero, you roll your dice, you play your moves, you fight each other. It's quick. Like I like the 1-to-1 battle. I think is more my thing. But I mean, there are some great world domination games. The other games I don't mind. I love like. Do you play the big games too? Like I want to say Pandemic or Werewolf or any of those games, or do those appeal to you at all, or do you prefer like a smaller group?
I almost never play one-on-one games. So usually 4 to 7 people would be the typical games night group that I'd usually play with. I think I played Werewolf once, but you need a lot of people for Werewolf to be any fun. It tends to really quickly get boring for half the players because they're out of it and so on. So I like the idea of Werewolf, but only ever played it the one or two times.
No, it's fair. No, Werewolf requires a large audience to play because when people get knocked out, that allows them to go into smaller groups and play other games while the main game plays itself out. So it's just one of those. It's one of those games. I'm just curious what you prefer. I tend to go with again 1-to-1. Or just a solid group of people, because I think like the cool thing about board games is it's one of the best bonding, it's one of the best bonding things you can do with people, because everybody likes to play, everybody likes to have fun. As long as you're playing a game you're not playing a game like Monopoly where everybody eventually wants to flip the table, you're good, right? Monopoly is the most famous game, but it's also the one where it's just like it's brutal. Like you have to be a very cutthroat, and and when you're ahead, the game kind of encourages you to be a complete dick. And then that's not you want to heckle your friends a little bit if you're fighting against each other, but you don't want to be a complete asshole either. So that's. I
do find that tensions will run high sometimes in a competitive game, and sometimes there's people going home with hurt feleelings.
Yeah, that is the way.
I'd criticize them for their lack of maturity, but fairly often it's me. So
yeah, but and at least you can look at yourself in the mirror and say, you know what, not my thing. I'll stick with Seven Wonders, which is another game I really enjoy. Let's see here. So yeah, that's honestly really cool. I applaud you. If you ever finish the game, let me know. I would definitely pick up a copy for myself. That'd be really freaking cool. So when you get ready, let me know. I'll be like, so my buddy built a game. It's awesome. And actually, would you crowdfund that? Would you try to crowdfund that?
I can't imagine that really happening. What I can do with Game Crafter is I believe I can make it available for sale on their store once I've built it.
Okay.
So it is possible to have it available that way. I can't. I don't have enough passion for game creation to pour a huge amount into it. I want to have a fun game that I can play and be proud of, and then it's like I've scratched that itch. I'm done. I don't need to keep pursuing it.
No, that's totally fair. No, I just asked that because you're that close, right? And it's just like, But that all said, still the offer stands. You finish the game. Let me know. I mean, hey, I can say that my buddy Brent built a really, really cool game, and if only I'm one of only 12 people that play it, I'm cool with that. Every time I bring it, I'd come back to Calgary. I'd play you, and then I'd play my buddy Corey. It'd be a game he had never seen before, so that'd be cool. So you scratched that itch, and you've been writing you much like me. It seems like the pandemic did not really slow down your creativity.
Not too much, no, not significantly.
No.
If anything, it freed up my schedule because there's other things that I couldn't do anymore. So there's been, it's overall, hasn't been too much of a negative effect.
No. So, but you've been trying some stuff out. Like we were talking, you've been working on another series under your pseudonym, Jake Elwood, and that like these books are kind of been kind of like important to you, or at least something you've always kind of wanted to tell?
It's so my Bounty Hunter Tales books. They're not some deeply held beloved passion project, but they are. They're books that are fun to write and fun to read. So I'm enthusiastic about them because I just really like them. They're fun. They're not. They're sort of written like episode television where you can watch, or like old school episode television where you can, each one is a standalone and you can read them in any order. And they're just there's a certain amount of drama and heart to them, but mostly they're just really fun outer space adventure stories. So stuff that I can really enjoy writing and really like. But yeah, it's not like some deeply passion.
Yeah. So like when we're talking like space stuff, are we talking like Buck Rogers space stuff, Battlestar Galactica space stuff? Are we talking
closer to Buck Rogers, I suppose. So it's called Bounty Hunter Tales, and it's just the story of this kick-ass woman who she's ex-military. She's got the kind of personality that just has left her. She's an adrenaline junkie, and she's just completely unsuited to anything like honest employment. So civilian life just keeps. The boredom drives her crazy, and so she takes really dangerous bounty hunting jobs to pay the bills, but mostly because life just gets dull without it.
Yeah.
And so it's just these sort of really fun, over the top, two-fisted, guns blazing bounty hunter adventure stories.
Did you ever read Planetary by any chance?
No.
Okay. It reminds me of a character in that series, Chiquita Wagner. She did things she was exploring the secrets of the universe mostly because she was bored. It sounds like these two would get along famously, or they'd kill each other one or the other. But yeah, it sounds like that's a cool premise. Like that's a really really cool premise. Is it like? Does she have recurring like characters or and things of that nature, or is it just it goes from place to place to place?
I set it up. I think in the back of my mind, I was thinking of it as, on some level, I was thinking about episode TV. I think, and the way you'll have some TV shows will have a certain structure. So each book begins with the wrap up of a mission. Like a James Bond movie where you get it's like you're coming in, or an Indiana Jones movie where you feel like you're coming in the last 5 minutes of the previous movie. So each book starts with the big slam bang exciting wrap up of a previous adventure, and then she goes back to her home on this orbit, this spinning space station, and there's some kind of interaction with her best friend and with her local bartender, and then something will happen that'll send her off on another mission, and then at the end of the mission, there's every book ends with another scene where she's back in the pub, Amir O'Leary's pub, hanging out with Amir and with her best friend who's the local cop, and sort of like an end of episode wrap up where they're looking at the aftermath of her mission and so on. So that's the only recurring characters. Aside from Lindy Cantos, that's the bounty hunter. The only other recurring characters, her best friend Ada and her bartender Amir O'Leary, are the only people who show up in every book.
So it sounds to me like this is a place where people can come, kind of get their adventure. They know what they're kind of going to get. It's going to be a fun time, and when it's over, it's over. But yeah, I can see the appeal in that. Like you've seen a glimpse of what one of the things I'm working on, right? It's not quite that. I think I'm not gonna say light because I'm not sure. It doesn't sound like it's necessarily a deep story, but a fun story. But I don't know how dark it is. Mine sounds maybe a touch darker. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I'd say your stuff is darker. Mine is more. Yeah. Mine's more fun. One way to look at it, it's like a Jack Reacher with a bra and a laser gun, basically.
I love that pitch.
It's that sort of, it's that sort of in a lot of ways, it's Jack Reacher-esque. It's a bunch of standalone adventure stories, and each one is satisfying, and it wraps up, and there's no link one book to another. You could read them in any order you like.
It's kind of an old school pulp series then in some way.
Also, yeah, it's also kind of pulpy, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Like pulp, I do think like even though I like you know that is I do feel like going into like post-pandemic, I feel like fiction's going to kind of go one of two ways for a little while. Either it's going to deal with the pandemic, or it's going to escape to like these faraway, fun, crazy worlds. Because I think escapism is probably going to be a big thing for a little while at least. And so I mean, I've gotten sillier with my writing, and it sounds like you're kind of exploring a very fun vein yourself. So.
Well, I mean, I'm bouncing around all over the place. I'm also writing some of the most serious and grim stuff that I've ever written in my life as well in other projects. So,
yeah, fair enough. Like, but it sounds like you've taken the opportunity to explore more things, which I think is really, really cool. Have you learned anything?
I've learned all sorts of stuff, although it's hard to. So, I started writing psychological thrillers almost by accident. So I sold a novella. I wrote this novel back when I was 28, 29, 30 years old. It took me forever to finish it. It was the second book I ever wrote, and it was sort of a mystery crime drama or psychological thriller, if you want to call it. And it wasn't terribly good. I made some half-hearted attempts to sell it back in the day and didn't get anywhere, and then I shelved it, and then I dusted it off starting maybe about a year ago. I've lost track. I dusted it off and looked at it, and there were some local micro publishers who were looking at publishing crime novellas. So I had a look at the book, and what I'd originally done with the book was I wrote it came out too short, so I started looking for ways to flesh it out enough to make it marketable. So I added all these extra flashback scenes and stuff that happened in the protagonist's childhood and so on, and it was okay, but then I realized, okay, there's an actual market here for a novella that this would suit, and I went through and started ripping out all the stuff that I'd added in with such difficulty. And also I found that I'd grown hugely as a writer just in the last 10 or 12 years. So I also massively refurbished this book. So by the end of it, it was novella length rather than novel length, and it was very, very different from what the original. So I ended up selling that to Seventh Terrace, a Calgary-based extremely small press, and that came out this past year. And it's the book's gotten a lot of praise. Sales have been very small, and it's a very small press, and they can't do live events, which is where really small presses tend to do their best. They'll actually, go to a live event and have their book on a table and flag people down as they walk past and say, hey, you need to check this out. This is awesome. So that's the one thing that small presses do really well, or one of many things that small presses do really well. Mm-hmm. So between the pandemic and the and just the fact that it's a smaller publisher, it hasn't sold terribly well, but it has gotten more praise than I expected, because I don't think of myself as writing psychological thrillers or crime dramas or mysteries. And then I went on to write another domestic thriller or psychological thriller that where I went into it thinking that I didn't know what I was doing. I went into it thinking, this is not the kind of thing that I write. I don't really know how to do this. Let me see if I can muddle through it. Although when I look back, I realize I've written several stories for Axel Howerton's noir anthologies and so on. So it's actually the kind of thing I've been writing almost without noticing it for apparently a few years now. So I also wrote that, which I sent to an editor that I really trust, and somebody who really knows books and really knows the market, and she feels that it's with a fairly small amount of work that it could sell to the big five, which I did not expect. I was planning to self-publish it. I was expecting her to say, well, here's how to make it palatable, and and at least not stink. But she was actually quite pleased with it, which was really caught me by surprise. I had no idea that it was going to be. So one of the things that I guess that I've learned is that apparently I write psychological thrillers, and apparently I'm good at it. I had no idea on either score. Yeah, that's one of the big startling lessons of the past year.
I'm not entirely surprised. I mean, you're a pretty your humor is incredibly dry, but I've noticed this. You're a pretty observant dude. You're aware of what's around you, even though like you're very quiet in the background. You tend to look and notice and down and take a feel of things, and and so I'm not surprised. Like, and also I almost feel like talking about earlier, like games. I always feel like you're almost like you're building a puzzle with a psychological thriller. Now I may be totally off base saying that.
Yeah, absolutely. You're trying to get building
say. So for me, it feels like these are muscles you've been quietly developing for years and years and years and years. And one of the things I've noticed as I've gotten older / wiser is a lot of these like seemingly innocent skills usually involve deeper skills that we don't necessarily realize we're doing at the time, but they give us a foundation for when later on we try some of this stuff. Like, I don't know if I can do this, right? You end up like, no, I've been doing it all along. Like, what the hell, right? And you just stumble into that. It's like, but you've been probably quietly training yourself for this at least for the last 5 years.
Seems that way, yeah. So there's a weird thing in my head. I think of myself, because this was the way I started out, I think of myself as a very plot-oriented writer. When I was 18 years old and I was working on my first novel, I thought almost entirely in terms of what are the plot events that is the book. The setting is incidental. The book's got to be somewhere, right? And the characters are just there to make the plot happen and so on. And I really started out thinking almost purely in terms of plot and being oblivious to a large degree to character and almost oblivious to setting and so on. And I still think of myself that way, as this action-oriented, plot-oriented writer, but things have crept into my writing where some of my books are really very much about character and the exploration of character, which it kind of caught me by surprise. It's like, where did that come from?
I have a theory.
The kind of writer I think I am.
I have a theory about that. Would you like to hear my theory? As we get older, we give less of a shit about who we try to pretend to be. Like, I found when I started writing, I was always very much in my head, right? But to actually get to this point where I would say I've gotten confident, we'll say good might be debatable, but confident, right? I realized that this is important, but it's not the big tool. This is, what do I give a crap about, right? And as I've gotten deeper into writing, and also partly in my case, because I interview so many people, I'm fascinated by people. So now I've kind of come to that point where it's like, okay, who is this person? Why should I care? What's their story? So, I have all this elaborate plot sometimes in these really cool worlds and it built in, right? Fundamentally speaking, there's some things about the character that I know need to come out, need to be said and stated and things of that nature. But part of that's also my maturity. As I've gotten older, I've become much more comfortable being more vulnerable. I don't give a shit what people think. This is who I am. If you don't like it, fuck you. I don't know if you're that brash about that as I am, but I do feel like there's a sense of comfort with who you are as a person. And I find when you have that comfort, you're not so much afraid to explore different things about your personality, and you're not, and it probably like creeps. I think with artists in particular, it creeps into their work because we are exploring, like telling stories about things that matter to us, and at some point who people are, the people we care about, or who we are, and I think that stuff just naturally gravitates in. Does that make sense, or am I crazy?
It's not something I would have arrived at on my own, but I think that's likely that's an element. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of it is probably just me gaining a little bit of wisdom and insight, and I don't know what else it is. It's just the soup, what rises up out of the soup of my subconscious as well.
So I'm gonna compare you to Craig DeLuise for a second here, because his books now are incredible. Like they're a lot better than what they were when he first broke into traditional publishing. And I feel like there's a maturity process, I think, with all of us. And the other part is too, you've been writing a long time. So they always say that those first, like, even our first books, I can already tell the difference between my second and third books compared to my first novel. They're vastly better in draft form than my final one is, because of just some little things I've noticed and done and did. But I've also done a lot more practice since then too, and I will get better and better and better as I write more and more books. That's just how it goes. You've written a ton of books. You're a very prolific guy, right? And as a result, you recruit experience enough that, again, part of it is personality, but part of it is also just practice. Great at your craft, right?
I am a firm believer in the value of practice. I think that, yeah, I cringe at the thought of people who spend years and years and years and years and years on their first book, or even on their first chapter, and they know the chapter isn't right, so they rewrite it and they tinker, and they just spend endless time on the same few pages. And if they would spend the same time writing a half a dozen crummy books, they would be vastly better writers at the end. And it's I firmly believe that the best approach is just to dive in, write it, let it suck, go on to the next book and the next one, and maybe it's your third book that will actually be good. You spend 2 years tinkering with one book, or you spend 2 years writing 5 books. The better writer is the guy who wrote 5 books. Maybe in each individual book is, out of those 6 books that those 2 people have written between them, maybe the first 2 books by the guy who's rushing through it aren't as good as the one book that the guy spent 2 years on. But the last 3 books written by a guy who's already written 2 books, they're better. They're the best of out of those 6 books. You're not learning you're not learning very much when you're tinkering endlessly. So if you're still working on, listen carefully, boys and girls, if you're still working on the same first chapter or the same first novel that you're working on 2 or 3 years ago, finish it, let it be bad, write the next book. You're robbing yourself of what you would have written otherwise. You're robbing yourself of the skill you would be gaining if you would just write a couple more books.
So I in general agree with you. I am going to play devil's advocate slightly here before we dive into it. But I actually do in general agree with you. I'll tell you why afterwards. But here's the thing. I do think there is something to be said, I think there's a point of complexity in books too sometimes. Like there are some, I don't know, have you ever read anything by Neil Stephenson?
Yes. Neil Stephenson needs to take as long as he needs to write his books. He needs however much time it takes him, that's how much time he should spend. He is so completely in his own league that...
Oh no, he's amazing. Personally, I like Snow Crash. Definitely changed how I looked at fiction. Like Snow Crash, Cryptonomicon. That book, I both love it and I hate it. I think I just like everything he did afterward was better, but he needed Cryptonomicon to do what he does now, and I get that. But the thing I admire about Cryptonomicon was the meta story, like all that stuff he put in that. Like, there's no way you could have done that in a year. Like, that was like the imagination. I think there is something to be said about when you want to make pieces that complex. Taking your time on them may not be a terrible deal. Yeah. Right? But where I completely agree with Brent is this. Perfection is the fucking enemy of good. And honestly, if you can ditch that whole perfection thing and just put material out there, you'll get probably one of the best recent examples is myself with my drawings. My first ones aren't that great, but I went in there knowing they were going to suck. I had fun with them. they're better. I'm not saying I'm good yet, but they're better. And
it has been, yeah, it's been really interesting for me. I've been pursuing art for the last several years, and looking at the way I approach writing and the way I approach art has actually been giving me all kinds of insights into how I write and how I draw. It's like it's the same trying to get good at art is the same process as trying to get good at writing, except I have vastly less emotional investment in the idea of being a good artist. I'm very invested in the idea of being a good writer.
yeah, I know that's a big part of it. It's a different language. It's almost like learning a different language, right? Because you're still telling a story, but it's how you're doing it. And I find my writing informs my art, and my art also now in turn has informed my writing. My current, I'm writing like a homage to Ray Bradbury called Lights Out, which is my little homage to Fahrenheit 451. The main character's name is Montag, so I think you can figure out what the kind of story I'm telling here. However, right, me doing illustrations plays a huge role in this book.
Yeah.
I never would have thought of imagery the way I do now if I hadn't drawn. Like it completely changed how I looked at imagery, and for the better, I think. For the better, I don't know, but I've let some people see glimpses of it. When it's all done, I'll definitely I'll be like beta. I need betas. It's gonna be like pictures, words, and pictures together, and I know the pictures are gonna suck. That's okay. They don't need to be great. They just need to tell the story I want to tell. That's all I really care about. So I get you. Like there's a detachment. I'm having when I do illustrations, it's more about having fun than it is about being good. And I think I'm gonna try to carry that with my writing a little bit more now, because that's honestly a good way to approach writing too. It doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. I don't need to be good. This can be the silliest piece of garbage out there. Who cares, right? I had fun, and the thing about fun is fun's kind of contagious in its own right.
It's a tricky spot to hit where you say, I care about being a good writer. I want my writing to be good. I'm going to work hard and make it as good as I can, but I'm going to not stop on that place where it just cripples me and stresses me out and I don't write anything, because that doesn't work. It's so easy to end up in that spot where you say, this sentence is not brilliant. I need to rewrite this sentence. I've been working on this sentence for 8 months now and it's not perfect yet. And so I'm still, it's because all the stuff you say, because I know that you do care about the quality of your writing, but you need to get to that point where you say, okay, what's the best way to write something that's good? And maybe the best way to write something that's good, or even the best way to write something that's absolutely brilliant, is to get out of your own way and write something that's bad, or not critique yourself at every single step to the point where you don't take any more steps.
Well, yeah. Well, it's like some criticism is good. Like sometimes your shit stinks. It's the truth. But but there's a point too. It's like, okay, yeah, but what about this? Did this work? Right? And you have to put yourself on that limb sometimes. And again, as you say, there's that fine balance. I do care. I want my story to be the absolute best story it possibly can be. Because if it's not, then what the hell am I doing? I mean, there is that pride. You take a little pride. You take pride in your work. But at the same token, man. Like I've learned, that perfection is a great ideal to shoot for in the draft mode. But but get it out. Just get the freaking thing out. You can always rebuild it later. And so I have a theory too about our voice as a human being. I feel like every 3 years it evolves. Right? I just feel like because we go through our whatever experiences we go through, it changes us enough that we can't write the same stories we did when we were younger. So I think there's like a time limit with every story too that we have to tell. Like, I'm not talking like the authors doing like these big book series, because even those, although they are the same characters, I do find that from a technical standpoint, the writing actually gets better as time goes on in those books. But that voice you had when you started, that 5-year-old stick figure, gee, Mom, this is the best I did. This is absolutely 100% awesome. you lose it after about 3 years on any project. That's my theory anyway. Yay, nay? Like,
I would hesitate to pin it down at a certain number, but there's definitely there's definitely wisdom in what you say. Yeah.
yeah. So guys, I tend to agree. Like, unless you're doing Cryptonomicon, and God bless you if you're doing Cryptonomicon, all right? Because that I'm not mature enough to even try that, but that's what he did there. That was incredible. Right, just write as much as you can, and try to get as many things out there as you can.
Now, good general advice is never listen to a writer who says you must never do this or you must do it this way, because what works for one person does not work for another person. So I've got borderline attention deficit disorder. I cannot help jumping from project to project. I really can't work on one book for 2 years. I just can't do that. That seems like a horrifying idea. So I'm constantly hopping from genre to genre, and it's not necessarily a good thing. So
interesting arc.
To some extent, what I'm telling you to do is, hey, here's how I've rationalized the bizarre way that I work. Here's all of the justifications I can find for leaping from project to project and story to story, because I absolutely cannot help myself. So here's all the reasons that it's a good thing that I'm doing it this way.
You almost made me spit take my coffee.
I enjoyed that too. That was
like choke. It's like, yeah, it's good.
Inside my brain, I was patting myself on the back.
Yes, I broke him on the air. No, just the only thing I'm going to say about this. Do you consider yourself just a writer then? Because you've done so many different genres at this point, or do you still see yourself as that first genre you wrote?
That's a good question. I certainly have an abiding fondness for fantasy and science fiction. Not any more specific than that. What I really, really love is adventure stories, and it's fantasy and science fiction that give you that sense of wonder, that sense of endless, vast, exotic possibilities that the real world doesn't so much anymore. It's like my next favorite thing would be historical adventure stories, Indiana Jones or The Mummy, because 100 years ago or 70 years ago, the world had so much of the world was unknown, and it took so long to get places and get information and so on, that the world was a wilder and bigger place a century ago. So that's kind of that's a big part of why I love science fiction and fantasy equally, and why I love adventure stories like Indiana Jones or The Mummy, because it's the combination of I like grand sweeping adventures. That's what I really love, and the best way to read them or write them is in the science fiction and fantasy genres. So it's kind of like at the root of it. That's where it is, and yet I find myself writing these really claustrophobic, psychological mystery thrillers. So I'm vast. I contain multitudes. I contradict myself endlessly.
You're a paradox, my friend. Brent Nichols, author, Paradox.
I'm half a dozen docs, maybe a dozen of them.
Yeah. But no, I actually think it sounds. So this I think I can figure out what you and I have. See, here's the thing I love about science fiction. I love that discovery. It's that discovery, and so, say like you, I love the discovery and surprise. My favorites are when there's actually the stories are a bit of both. My personal, if I had to pick two authors that now that I'm older, I appreciate more, are Roger Zelazny and Michael Moorcock. Especially Michael Moorcock. Younger me didn't like him so much. Mm-hmm. Older me is like, you're a fucking genius. Like, you're just a genius on so many levels. Because I love, all his concepts on the Eternal Champion are bombastic. It doesn't matter whether it's Elric or Quorum or Hawkmoon. Hawkmoon's actually my favorite. I just love that little trilogy. Is just fantastic. And but the same thing, these big over the top stuff. Like Hawkmoon has a jewel in his skull, and he has to serve this empire, and this empire is undeniably evil, and you're going across the multiverse to do it, and it's just like what, like I love that grandeur, that story, that. But I also love the surprise too, because I think those stories, and the reason I actually pick Zalazi, and the reason I love Zalazi, I look at something like Nine Princes in Amber, where it's about Corman discovering who he is. It's a character piece in a fantastic world, and he told it so brilliantly and compactly. Like, that's the kind of stuff I like, and that's the kind of stuff I want to try to get to. Right? If I'm half as good as he is, I did okay. You know what I mean? So
I can absolutely relate to that idea.
yeah. So and as for historical, have you tried Flashman? I'm just
oh, Flashman's largely awesome. Every once in a while, it's like I want him to be a better person, but yeah, the Flashman books are great. Those are hilarious. It's so well done in so many ways. Sneaks up on you, and it's like, wow, I can't believe he wrote that, and that's brilliant, and I love it, and I'm vaguely embarrassed with myself for being this impressed.
Well, but because there's a certain irony to it, right? That's the way I love it. Like, that's what I love about Flashman is he's not a great person. He's everything you despise. But he just so happens to draw whatever he draws to him, and it's hilariously brilliant. And if folks, my own personal recommendation, if you are a fantasy author or a fantasy science fiction lover that want to try to cross over into historical, Flashman's the door. Take Flashman first, and then from there go wherever you want. But start there. My advice: take it or leave it. But I mean, that's my advice. I discovered I went. So unfortunately, P&B Books in Windsor is shutting down due to the pandemic. These bookstores are probably the biggest victims of the whole pandemic in terms of bookstores, because as cool as they are, you go to those things to actually check books out. That's why you go to a used bookstore. You like discovering old treasures. Now, one bookstore here, Juniper Books, is never going to go out of business. That's going to be open as long as the owner wants it to. Unfortunately, P&B doesn't have the same thing. But the good thing is she's got so many cool books. Like I added Julie Trinata, Kristen Brinton, and Flashman to my collection as a result of, like, you have Flashman? Do you have more? No. Tears. Because it's just like, and that's the other thing I love about science fiction collectors too. There's always these book series that make all of us smile, because we just remember either we read them at a younger age, and it still sticks with us. I found one of them with you with the Flashman. What were the other ones, if you don't mind?
It's there were these. When I was a kid, there were these the Rick Branch science adventure stories. Man, those are my all-time favorites. They were like the Hardy Boys. They had the same kind of hardback cover with the picture printed on the front, and the first one came out right after World War II, and then it came out one a year for something like 20 books, and they're aimed at teenage boys, and it's like straight to it's just that's my great big fat nostalgia button that just circumvents all. I can't read them critically at all. I can't tell you if there's anything wrong with any of the books, because they just go right to my heart, and I read them at a time when they just seemed wonderful at that time, and they still seem that's what pushes the button for me every time is Rick Brandt. And the one other one would be Treasure Island. Treasure Island is my enduring favorite. I love Treasure Island. So and then there's like 40 or 50 other books or series that I could list, but we'll stop there.
Yeah, for me, it's comics. Not the movie. We're not talking the movie. But Green Lantern, by and large, is that for me. It's not always good. Even deep down in my soul, I know it, but I don't care. Because of that feeling it creates when I read those books. I can't duplicate it. And of course, when they're great, they're great and they're brilliant, and they give you that feeling on top, and it's boot. But sometimes it's not necessarily the great stuff, but you grew up with it. It's your thing. It's your jam. So for me, it's that. Doc Savage. They're the old Doc Savage, man. The Bronze novels are super. They're hard to find, but I do look for them. They're always on my list of things. Like, cool. How much? Yes. Right. And the only sad part is sometimes they don't come cheap. And then you got I'm not allowed to go to Pulp Fiction books on unsupervised in Kelowna. I'm just not allowed to do that because if I go there, literally I walked in there. He's got all these old. I'm like, no, I can't come back in the store because I was moving to Vancouver at the time. I had piles of money for to get started in Vancouver. It's like you want to buy stuff here. It's like, yes, I do, but I can't. Please don't put me in that bookstore ever again because I won't be able to resist this twice. All these cool pulp stories, and I found the one I want. I couldn't not help myself. It was a Doc Savage. He smiled. I paid the price. We both smiled. He's like, "You want to check? No, don't show me anything more. No. Right? But that's but you got something special when the guys that own the place also get like this nice grin on their face of, yeah, this is good.
Finally had a cool customer come in who can appreciate the good stuff.
Yeah. Every collector loves those customers for two reasons. One, good taste. Two, they will pay for your books because you're not selling those books cheap. You're not. You're just not because you like them too much. I'll sell it because I'm a businessman, but I don't want to. But yeah, I digress. Like we all have those moments. So I guess I'm gonna ask this. I think this is a good way to wrap up this interview. I had fun catching up with you, man. It sounds like you've had a really good year of discovery. We both have done different things. I've drawn. You've created a game, and yeah, let me know when you finish it. But I think this. So is that your goal then as a writer, to create kind of that same experience, no matter whether it's with people with your books the same way that when they say whether it's Jake Elwood or Brent Nichols, Brent Nichols, and get that it seems like the goal of every good science fiction author at some level.
I don't know. I don't know how to articulate even to myself what my goals are as a writer. I know I have them, but I can't tell you what they are.
Sure.
Do you mind if I just close if I plug the short story contest?
Oh no. Do that. Actually, I was about to say that.
I just want to tell you about the annual short story contest it's linked with When Words Collide, the annual writing and reading festival every year in Calgary. This year, When Words Collide, on account of the pandemic, is online and it's free. So if you're interested in writing at all, or you're a reader interested in books, I strongly recommend When Words Collide. Look it up on Google. And there's an annual short story contest called In Places Between, the Robin Harrington Memorial Short Story Contest. No entry fee. Takes short stories. If you want to go to IPB Contest for In Places Between Contest, ipbcontest.weebly.com, or do a Google search for In Places Between Short Story Contest or Robin with a Y, Harrington Memorial Short Story Contest. So deadline for submissions is the 1st of May. You have to be a member of When Words Collide, but like I said, When Words Collide is online and free. Two submissions per entrant maximum, no entry fee, up to 4,000 words. Any genre, any sort of prose fiction up to 4,000 words is welcome. And we got cash prizes and glory that could be yours. We've also had far fewer entries so far this year than in previous years, so the hundreds of dollars in prizes that are up for grabs will never be easier to get than they are this year. So I want to get people actually entering the contest. It'd be awesome if you would. So In Places Between or Robin Harrington Memorial Short Story Contest.
Okay. So when this is over, this is what I want you to do. Just go say this on the air. Just give me some information. Maybe I can see if I can do something to help you guys out this year on the podcast for a month or so anyway. So
that'll be awesome.
Yeah. So that all said, where can we find you, man? So like we've talked about all kinds of things you do. So how can people find you to see all the other awesome things you do?
So I do have a website. So I write a lot of stuff under the pen name Jake Elwood. So you can find me at jakeelwoodwriter.com. So Jake Elwood, ELWOOD, jakeelwoodwriter.com. Or most of my books, slightly over half my books are probably exclusive to Kindle Unlimited. So you can look on Amazon for books by Jake Elwood or books by Brent Nichols.
All right.
Also, cover design work at coolseriescovers.com. So if you're an indie author and you're looking for affordable cover design work, coolseriescovers.com as well.
The only thing I'm going to add to that is if you want to see a tiny example of his graphic design work, the cards that you saw earlier this episode, that was all him, right? So, I mean, he is a great designer. So definitely check him out if that's your thing, guys. As for me, this was fun. I really enjoyed this conversation with Brent. And guys, if you want to support what I do, I'm this close to being an affiliate on Twitch. Like I literally at the door, hit the follow button, twitch.tv/JustJoshingPodcasts. My YouTube channel is Joshua Pantoresco if you guys want to watch previous episodes there. My podcast airs on pretty much every audio platform you can possibly imagine. Stay inspired, stay shining in the dark, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for the drink and draw.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh.